Today we have to talk about Aonuma yet again. Eiji Aonuma, the lead producer of the Legend of Zelda franchise, because we have an update on a story we did a couple of weeks ago dealing with the fact that he's been teasing the future of Zelda, and he's done it consistently. We're not going to go back over everything that was in that video because, again, this is an update to that story, but we're also going to add in some extra on top because the next Zelda game we're talking about is an Ocarina of Time remake, and I want to go over some of the improvements I would like to see in an Ocarina of Time remake. But I need to remind you guys that that is apparently and does appear to be what Eiji Aonuma has been teasing, at least based on his history, going all the way back to when he was teasing the Link's Awakening remake before the Nintendo Switch even came out. Now, why do we have an update on this? Well, the person who interviewed Eiji Aonuma last December at Game Informer came forward on Andres Restart's channel on his video and provided an update that is at least notable for this whole shenanigans and might even make it seem very likely considering how he reacted when asked about a playable Zelda that ultimately led to Echoes of Wisdom. Now, before we dive in, I want to remind you we are on our road to 150,000 subscribers. So if you're enjoying videos just like this, we would appreciate if you would subscribe to the channel and help us achieve our goal. And you know what? Why not go down to the comment section later in the video after you hear what I have to say and tell me what improvements you would like to see in an Ocarina of Time remake. We're talking about a remake, not a remaster. All right, so first we need to go back to the interview all the way back in December of last year that was dealing with Tears of the Kingdom, and go down to the bottom and look at the final question. The final question said, "Thank you so much for your time. I've heard about how sometimes questions about games can inspire them to be made. So I selfishly want to ask you about a modern Ocarina of Time remake. But I have a feeling I know the answer I'll get." And the response from Eiji Aonuma was laughs, no comment. Now, we went over the past how he goes out of character with his laughter and some of the comments he does make when answering questions or dealing with questions that are teasing future Zelda games. Now, we already knew this and we covered this in the last video, but it's notable because something happened. The interviewer himself, Brian Shea, commented on Andres Restart's video, and he added this: "Hey, I'm the one who did the Game Informer interview with Aonuma and Fujibayashi and asked the question about the Ocarina of Time remake. Thanks for continuing to cover our interviews on Zelda." Hey, I know you did say thank you to me, but you're welcome, Brian. He goes on to say, "Since you pointed out that he will sometimes say his answers in English, I feel it is pertinent to say that while I didn't type that he changed language during the interview, he did in fact laugh and say no comment in English." Now, why does it matter that Aonuma came out and said no comment in English? Well, he was also asked about a playable Zelda at one point, and he gave a sort of a generalized response about how, it'd have to be the right type of game, and, that's something they've definitely thought about. And then as his response was being translated, Aonuma interrupted the translator and said, in English, maybe. And that's why it's notable, because Aonuma doesn't normally speak English in any of his interviews, but he interjected after thinking about how he responded to cut off the translator to say maybe. And this was last December, so obviously at that point they already knew Echoes of Wisdom was coming. So Aonuma maybe thought, oh, maybe I said something I maybe shouldn't have, so I need to interject in English and clarify maybe. Very fascinating. Obviously, that ended up leading to Echoes of Wisdom. So this matters because, well, he did it again. He was asked directly about an Ocarina of Time remake, and he could have denied it. To be clear, Aonuma has directly denied things before. He was asked if they would ever make a Legend of Zelda Dungeon Maker game. Not the side edition. In fact, the side edition in Link's Awakening spurned some of the Dungeon Maker questions, and he outright said no. They're not going to do it. That is like the second or third time he has said no to different things when asked if they're going to do these things with Zelda. So Aonuma in his interviews is fairly direct, but it's when he's being coy when asked these direct questions that seem to always indicate what's coming next. And in this case, he didn't just laugh and say no comment. He said it in English. He wanted to clarify, no mistake through the translator, I am refusing to comment on this question, but I want you to know I'm laughing about it because he might know a little something going on behind the scenes. Now, this could all be tied to, obviously, the Zelda movie, which could have some Ocarina of Time tie-ins. It could also just be, hey, look, we're doing Echoes of Wisdom next. We got this game coming in 2025 or 2026 as a between game before we get to our next big game that we're working on behind the scenes, and all that stuff. So it is really fascinating just to think about this clarification from Brian Shea that, hey, he actually interjected and said this in English just to pay attention that if it does happen, if this is their next big Zelda game, well then, something to pay attention to when he decides, you know what, screw the translation, I'm just going to give you a direct English response. Now, this is where we get into, well, okay, let's say the Ocarina of Time remake is definitely happening. A modern Ocarina of Time remake, not some sort of HD remastering or a remastering of Ocarina of Time 3D. What improvements would I like to see in the game? And I have sort of a handful that might seem a little obvious, but aren't always guaranteed. So obviously the number one thing is graphics, right? We want to see a big graphical update to the game, maybe something more akin to the Wii U tech demo, or if that's going a little too far, I don't know that I really like the full direction of some of the Unreal Engine 5 remake footage, which is something we've been playing throughout this video, credit to Rowan Link, but I do want to make sure that it is something that does look modern but still feels like Ocarina of Time. I think if anyone can nail that, it would be Nintendo. They're not going to let a game come out like Ocarina of Time Remake without nailing the art direction. So yeah, that would be really nice to see. Beyond that, I also want to see some gameplay improvements. It needs to be modernized. It just needs to be modernized. We need to be able to control our camera freely with the second stick, make better use of the second stick for certain items. It would be really nice to see just some updated combat animations, an update to maybe his role. I don't know if they need to add a sprint button or not. You know, I'm not saying they should put stamina in here, because that wouldn't really be true to the game. I don't know if they really need to add a jump button, because that's not necessarily true to the game. However, they could add one if they like, but I'd like to see some modern gameplay and animation updates. Another thing that I want to see here is updated music. Look, they update music usually in remakes and remasters anyways, but I want to see fully orchestrated, updated tracks. Don't switch out the tracks that are in the game. Just give us fully orchestrated. You want to do new versions of them. You know, Koji Kondo wants to get involved and do that. That's totally fine. But obviously, I'd like to see fully orchestrated music. And speaking of music, I just want to make sure I also shout out the guys who make Zelda and Chill Game Chops. We got a link to them down below in the description because they have provided graciously all of the background music you're hearing throughout this video. That's how important music is, and every time I talk Zelda, I seem to always put Zelda music in my videos. I don't put music in all my videos, but I can't help it. We're talking Zelda. We need some Zelda and Chill. All right, now those are like some of the obvious things that wouldn't fundamentally change what the game is, but will at least make what's there just all the better and more immersive. So what else could they do? Well, there could be some additional side quests. One criticism I've had of Ocarina of Time is, at least in the first half of the game, there's a lot of you're supposed to care about this character because we tell you to care, rather than building a relationship. And that might feel like a criticism because it is one of my criticisms of the game, but also it's a symptom of the time the game came out. A lot of games are this way, where they would just tell you someone's their friend and now you're supposed to care about them, right? And that kind of happened with Saria. There was this big emotional scene when you leave the forest, the Kokiri forest, and she's hugging you and crying and gives you the ocarina. And it's supposed to be this big emotional moment that I never really felt the emotion because I barely knew who this girl was. A vague conversation at the very beginning of the game is about it. So I would like to see maybe a new side quest in the beginning that involves her that can build a stronger connection. I would just like to see more side quests in general. I think that is one thing they could do. Keep all the original side quests, add in a few more, a handful, a couple dozen, I don't know, and just add to the gameplay. That would be really great. Another thing, you know, in terms of the gameplay and the additional side quests is we can maybe get a new area. Now, this area wouldn't have to be story related. I'm not asking them to expand on the story, but it would be nice to have a new area. There's a part of the Hyrule map that isn't quite all the way filled in. Like, there's a section that feels like there could be another area, but there just isn't. If you know the history of Ocarina of Time, you know that at one point it probably was going to be a different area. So it would be cool to have an area appear there, even if it's just like a Cave of Ordeals sort of area, like we had in Twilight Princess. Or if it ends up being something else entirely, right? It could just be a zone full of a bunch of side quest stuff, some additional missions that are inconsequential to the story, but still really fascinating. Maybe give you more background on Sheik and all that stuff. So there's a lot of things they could do, but I would like to see a new area that's not just like akin to a new fishing pond like they did in Majora's Mask 3D. Now, another thing would be voice acting. Look, they don't have to add in voice acting, right? And I will say, if they do add voice acting, and I want it to be full voice acting, let's just be honest, there's not a lot of dialogue in this game compared to something like a Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom. I would like it to be full voice acting. But if they add voice acting in, I do think they should offer a toggle to turn it off. There's going to be some people that just don't like the voice acting, and while you could probably change the languages and all that, a toggle to turn it off and just do it old school and read the text boxes, I think would be respectful to people that are love the original game and maybe don't like the new voice acting stuff. But I personally would like to see full voice acting thrown in. And then the last thing would be flesh out the world a little bit more. Throw a little more things in Hyrule Field. Don't keep it just so empty. Maybe a bit more enemy variety. You don't have to go so crazy, because part of the charm is the enemies in the game are all important, but I wouldn't mind a little bit more enemy variety. And then just make the game a little bit more open. I'm not asking you to take Ocarina of Time and make it open world. That just wouldn't be fair to the game. But if you didn't know, you can actually do certain dungeons out of order, even though the game doesn't intend for you to do, and it doesn't actually break the game. So just enable us to do that without having to do things like wall sidles and little glitches and stuff like that. That would just be appreciative, because look, people are going to try to do it anyway, so why not just encourage it? Hey, if you want to do the fire temple before the forest temple or whatever, just let people do it. It's not that big of a deal. And again, all the dungeons are beaten with the item you get in the dungeon, so it's literally not that big of a deal. So I would appreciate if they would just allow something like that to happen. Otherwise, I don't really think they need to change up a whole lot. I think between the visual overhaul, the gameplay updates, the music, a little bit of side quests, and opening up the gameplay just a bit with some voice acting, honestly, that just sounds like the perfect sort of remake to me. Obviously, they could go all out and do it like Final Fantasy VII Remake style, which not only is going all out, but technically Final Fantasy VII Remake's like sort of a sequel to Final Fantasy. If you actually play through the story, you'll find out that it's not actually a remake of Final Fantasy VII. They could do something like that with Ocarina of Time. After all, hell, there's 3 timelines, and one timeline they seem to just pull out their butt, so maybe they could have a better explanation for that. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just throwing out there all these possibilities, and I want to know what you guys want to see, and you can go into deep details down below, or if you just don't think a remake should be done because you're too afraid of how they could ruin the game, you could do that as well. Of course, I will note, and I say this as somebody who was very disappointed with the Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles remake. I really hated what they did with that game. They absolutely butchered Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles. However, it didn't ruin the original experience, because I could still go back on the GameCube, I could still play the original experience, and still have a damn good time. So I just want to note that even if the remake gets messed up and ruins the game, it's only ruining that version of the game. It's not ever going to take away the original. That's always going to be there. You can always go enjoy that. And Nintendo has made Ocarina of Time pretty readily available. It's on the Nintendo Switch Online app probably forever, or at least the rest of my life. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Let me know what you think about this video down in the comments below. I am Nathaniel Rumpleljans from Nintendo Prime, and of course, I will catch you in the next video.